Alright, so today we're looking at domains. And domains are the broadest category in classification. All living things can be divided into three different domains, either bacteria, archaea, or eukarya. Bacteria and archaea, as we'll see, are very similar looking, but they do have some noticeable differences. Prokaryotic cells, and if you don't remember, prokaryotic means cells without a nucleus, are very diverse. When our RNA sequences were compared, and this means ribosomal RNA, so all living things have ribosomes, and ribosomes have their own RNA sequence, and so when you compare those together, it was clear that the two distinct groups of prokaryotes, the eubacteria and the archaea, were separate from each other, that not all prokaryotic cells were in one domain. And so fairly recently, within the last 50 years, we've split prokaryotic cells into two different domains, bacteria and archaea. Sometimes bacteria are referred to as eubacteria. Don't get that confused with eukaryotes. Eu is not referring to a nucleus. Eu just means true. So when we say eubacteria, we're really saying true bacteria, because those are the bacteria that you think of when you think of bacteria. They're going to fall under the bacteria or eubacteria branch. Eukaryotes, this meaning true, karyote meaning nucleus. So these have a true nucleus. This is known as a cladogram, which is essentially a tree that we use to classify things, and branches on the tree show different domains here. And if you look and trace back the branches to their branching off point, that's where we believe a common ancestor was between those two domains. So, for instance, the ancestor of both archaea and eukaryotes would be found here. The ancestor of archaea, eukaryotes, and bacteria would be found here. Now, since that is the ancestor of all three domains, this is what we call LUCA, or the last universal common ancestor. This doesn't mean it was the first living thing to emerge, but it was the first living thing in which everything that's around on Earth today descended from. And we believe this is about 3.8 million years ago. Sorry, 3.8 billion years ago. Notice here that eukaryotes and archaea are more related to each other than either is to bacteria. So even though archaea are prokaryotic, they are much more closely related to eukaryotes like us. And we can see that in this table here. These are showing different characteristics. So eubacteria and archaea are both prokaryotic. They don't have a nucleus. They don't have internal compartments. Eukaryotes are eukaryotic. They have a nucleus. They have internal compartments. Eubacteria and archaea always must be unicellular. You'll never find a multicellular bacteria. Eukaryotes, however, can be unicellular or multicellular. You can have a eukaryotic cell like a paramecium that has a nucleus, or your skin cell is a eukaryotic cell. It has a nucleus. Those are both one cell big, but a lot of eukaryotes are multicellular. They're made up of more than one cell. In terms of their DNA, eubacteria and archaea have a single circular chromosome, whereas in eukaryotes you have more than one chromosome, and those chromosomes are linear, meaning they look like a line. They're not a circle. Eubacteria and archaea can only do asexual reproduction, but eukaryotes, some can do asexual, some can do sexual, some can do both. In eubacteria, or bacteria, the DNA is naked, meaning that it's not wrapped around these histone spheres that we see in archaea and eukaryotes. So DNA wraps around histones in these. In eubacteria, there's only one origin of DNA replication. That's the origin of replication is where DNA replication starts. But in archaea and eukaryotes, there can be multiple origins of DNA replication. Eubacteria has more unique metabolic processes, more adapted to their different environments, whereas archaea and eukaryotes share similar metabolic processes, such as how ATP is made or the enzymes involved in protein synthesis. Eubacteria has a unique DNA polymerase, whereas archaea and eukaryotes share a DNA polymerase. So you can see that archaea and eukaryotes share quite a few things that eukaryotes and eubacteria don't share. A couple examples of species for eubacteria, bacteria that you're used to hearing about, like E. coli or Streptococcus, which causes strep throat, those would be eubacteria or bacteria. As for archaea, these are more extremophiles. They tend to live in really extreme environments, whether it's a super salty environment or a really hot environment. They're really cool forms of life, and a couple examples of them here: Methanococcus, Halobacterium, Thermoproteus. And then eukaryotes, there are these four kingdoms: animals, plants, fungi, and protists.